In this lesson, we're going to talk about web servers. So what exactly are web servers? Well, web servers, they can be everything from a large server machine sitting somewhere in the cloud where you've got hosts that's hosting your website, or it could be your local machine. And all that a web server does is it actually has the ability to interpret HTTP requests in your browser. So now when I do a local host, we'll see that we're actually just going to my local machine, and this is the set of code that's actually sitting that we were just looking at within Dreamweaver. So if I go over here and if I change something, or maybe I'll just change this title and also change my top title, so this is some HTML code, and when I go back out here and just look at this part over here, when I refresh it, we get that new title up there, and we also get the new title here, the one that we just edited. Shrink that down a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see. So this is actually a web server that's running on my own machine right now, the one that I'm even recording this video on. And there's a number of different ways to get your local machine running, and this is often done in order to develop your website and test out your code, work through any bugs, and just make sure that everything looks and functions the way you want it to before you upload it to your server. And it's especially important when you're using back-end code, because you want to have the ability to actually test and run that code. So I could actually test and run PHP code on here. I can set up a database and a whole lot more, just all within my local work machine. And it's going to work the same way as any one of these sites that have HTTP. It's going to work the exact same way as a web server that's interpreting the HTTP requests online. So there's a number of different ways to do that, and one of them that I'm using right now is called a XAMPP server. So this is just my control panel for it, and as you can see when I start it, it's got the server software that's running, or the server iOS or operating system is Apache, and I've got some options here to administer it. I can change and update my config, and I've got shell access to it as well. If I want to start a SQL database, all I have to do is just start that there. I can also start FileZilla, Mercury, and Tomcat. So these are all other options here within the XAMPP server. And if I'll actually take it one step further, I can set up a virtual box. So a virtual box is something that can actually run on my own machine and can run as its own operating system on my machine. So in this particular example, I have Ubuntu 64-bit that's able to run, and I've got my base memory and a whole bunch of information here. So all I have to do is hit start, and this is actually going to power up the virtual machine, and it's going to run an instance of the web server right on my local machine, and from there I'm going to be able to access it and save and update code. So when you do transfer your web content up to a server, so it will function the same way. The server configuration might even be something similar that you're able to run on your local machine. And when you do transfer it, we oftentimes use FTP, or we transfer it through the cloud using Git. So there's a number of different ways to transfer, but most commonly people are transferring files just using FTP. So what they'll use is they'll use an FTP program, and they'll log into their web server, and it's going to be like a file directory, just like you would see within your local computer. And from there you can simply transfer files over, drag and drop them within Dreamweaver. There's actually an ability to upload it directly from Dreamweaver. Some of the editors actually have the ability to connect to your web server and FTP your files up and down from your live server. And operating systems such as Windows already has the capability to run as a web server. So all I have to do is enable the IIS service. And as well, you've got the same capabilities for Macs, where you're able to run it as a local machine and connect to it locally and test out your applications before you upload it, and then uploading it to your web server and having it run on there. So web server is just simply a piece of software that's able to communicate with clients that are accessing the machine, and the clients are the viewers that are coming to the machine, and they're coming using HTTP, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So this is different than FTP because that's the file transfer protocol, and then the pages get delivered from the files that are sitting on the host machine, the one that's running the web server. And we can see here that the web browsers are the ones that will access the server files and then render them out accordingly. There's also server-side script. So this has to actually be set up. There's a few different scripting languages, constructor languages, such as ASP and PHP. So those would need to be set up on the server. So again, when you are looking for a web server, you have to make sure that you're looking for one that can accommodate. So Microsoft servers generally are the ASP servers, whereas PHP is Linux. So if your server has Linux, it's going to be running PHP, and if your server has Microsoft, it's going to be running ASP. And then as well, they're the ones that contain the databases, so whenever you do make that connection, it can render out all the appropriate content that's been created within the website. And there's quite a lot of advantages to running them locally when you are developing. So you do have the ability to see what it's going to look like. You have the ability to run your server-side scripting, such as your ASP and PHP. You also have the ability to check over and make sure that you don't have any errors with the coding paths, because you would need to include the same coding structure as you would on your web server as you do in your development environment. And then also there's just the ability to practice and work with your files, and gives you a lot better understanding about how the web server works. So I would encourage you to download XAMPP or another simple tool that you can set up a web server, and we can see here it's running on port 80, so that's the default port for internet access. And just check out all the different options within XAMPP, and this will get you started quickly. And also then Oracle VirtualBox, so this is another one that's a free software, and you can download this from Oracle. And as well, if you've got the image, so Ubuntu is a free server that you can download. So all you have to do is download the ISO and do an installation on your VirtualBox. If you've got Windows Server software, then you can install that as well, and so on. So depending on what software you have to run your server, you should be able to set that up within VirtualBox.